Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
Welcome to a very special edition of Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also Nerd Initiative editor-in-chief. To my left, you're right at home, the head of NI Wrestling, but one of our head comic reviewers himself. Please give a warm welcome to Rich.
That's right. I am back in the saddle again here for some Turn a Page to talk some awesome COMIXOLOGY book even. Little teaser there.
Oh, indeed. And joining us, the third member of our team, and it is in his contract. He has to do his own intro.
Coming at you live and dark, straight from the Sanctum of Awesome. My name's Off the Cuff Tom, Nerd Initiative's pop culture connoisseur. Ken, Rich, and Mark. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And we have a fantastic book to talk about that's debuting on Tuesday, April 29th. See, I'm so excited. I'm almost watching up the day when it's coming out, but you don't want to miss it when it comes out on COMIXOLOGY Originals, combining the adventure and sci-fi epic rolled into one. There's so much going on with this, and knowing the creator behind this, you know that he's got a lot going on with it. You know his work from such TV shows as Law & Order and Arrow, Green Lantern film, and any Lifetime, which the book review is on nerdinitiative.com. And you also know his work from Spider-Man and Wolverine and Star Wars Jedi Knights at Marvel, to name a few. Please give a warm welcome to the writer of The Adventures of Ulysses Monarch, Marc Guggenheim. Mark, what is going on?
Hey, well, this is so much fun, guys. Thank you for getting on the podcast with me, or letting me on your podcast, I should say. Sorry, I'm tired. It's been a long week already. It's only Monday. But yeah, things are good. I'm so excited about getting this book out into the world finally. I've actually been working on it with Harvey Talbot for the last 5 years, believe it or not. We started this during lockdown. So it's incredibly exciting to finally get it out out into the world.
Oh, definitely. The fans are definitely want to make sure they download this first day at COMIXOLOGY, because there is a lot going on with this. So why don't we break down about how this whole story came to be?
Well, it all started really with, with people saying to me, it started out originally as like a TV idea, because people were saying, oh, we're really missing like a Star Wars show that's not attached to Star Wars, or an Indiana Jones show that's not attached to Indiana Jones. We want something like that's sort of like 4-quadrant adventure, fun for the entire family. And I ended up coming up with an idea that, quite frankly, was simply too expensive to do on television. Of course, I was like, okay, well, the idea is still really solid. I really like this idea. I should just, I also write comics, and I should pivot to comics. And, a little bit of backstory here in terms of like how I ended up working with Harvey. So what happened was, Harvey and I had worked together on an arc for Adjectiveless X-Men for Marvel, many moons ago at this point. And he and I had always talked about doing a creator-owned book together. And then basically when lockdown happened, I'm like, you know what? Now I'm going to look at all the ideas I have in my notebook for creator-owned comic book projects and do a whole bunch of those, because I suddenly have all this time on my hands like everyone else did, right? Yeah. So I had this idea for what became The Adventures of Ulysses Monarch, and the first person I thought of was Harvey, because I thought, oh, this is like the perfect melding of our two brains. Harvey is amazing at drawing action, and he's amazing at drawing like world building and creating like all these really cool ship and character designs. I just thought, oh, this is like a perfect marriage of artist with material. We just started getting going. I brought in Mark Englert, who had been our colorist on the graphic novel my wife and I did called Halcyon, and I managed to talk a lot without actually telling you what the book's about. Isn't that impressive?
Oh, it is.
That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, thank you. It's not my first rodeo. I've done this before.
Sounds like he's worked in TV.
Right. So basically, like the concept of the book, the elevator pitch is really super simple. It's an Indiana Jones type character, a collector of rare antiquities, but he lives in the far-flung future. So the ancient civilizations that he is, investigating and exploring is actually our civilization. The 20th and 21st century. So those objects of great antiquity are things like an iPhone. So it's really like, so it's a fun, real. It is really, it does feel a lot like, what if Star Wars and Indiana Jones had a baby? It's got that, it's got that sort of feel to it. And Harvey's art is, obviously perfect for that. When we started working on this, Harvey wasn't doing Star Wars comics for Dark Horse. So in many ways, like he sort of, Lucasfilm discovered the same thing I did about him, which is, oh, he's really the perfect artist for this kind of, comic. And it's really just a blast. Indiana Jones always has a sidekick. So in this case, it's a young girl named Casey Sparks, who I sort of describe as she's the PG version of Hit Girl from the Kick-Ass comics. And she sort of taught herself all these martial arts by watching 1980s, action movies. She's got like in her quarters on the ship that they fly around in. She's got stacks and stacks and stacks of of DVDs. So she's like a connoisseur of the 20th and 21st century.
And it's amazing. Like I say, there's so much going on with this, and it's so multi-layered. Not just an adventure book, but there is just so many elements that I think fans are going to really gravitate towards when they pick this up.
Thanks. I hope so.
Yeah.
Now,
Absolutely.
you mentioned that there's a lot of different, Indiana Jones style and sci-fi and everything. How far back are we doing the antiquity stuff? And also on top of that, how expansive is this galaxy going to be, since they're, looking for things that you're saying are relative to our particular time period? So how far has civilization expanded since then?
Great question, actually. So basically, when we come in, it's the year 3026. It's the it's the it's the 29th century. I can't do math. And humanity basically has abandoned the Earth. The humanity has spread throughout the stars, and now Earth is basically like a third world country. And the only people who are on Earth are people who are stuck there. No one wants to be living on Earth. And of course, that includes our protagonists, who basically have been like hunting down these antiquities for a benefactor in the hopes that eventually they'll make enough money to be able to buy themselves a ticket off world. So actually, the first arc is really confined to Earth, and it's probably and it's near, anything that's in Earth and sort of like the Milky Way galaxy, or our solar system. So we don't go full Star Wars, until the second arc. But the part of the fun of seeing the Earth at this stage in its history is we get a chance to sort of revisit a lot of sort of famous landmarks, but with the perspective of hundreds of years, and a lot has changed, suffice it to say.
Absolutely. So with this book being a big adventure book, of course, comparing it to Indiana Jones, has the adventure genre always been an influence on you and your writing? And with that, what is its biggest appeal?
Well, it has been a huge influence on me. In fact, my original exposure to Indiana Jones was actually through comics. I read the Marvel Comics adaptation, at least the first month of it, before seeing the movie. So I've always associated adventure with the medium of comics. And I'd say like I'm probably I'm probably this huge influence of these movies that came out when I was like around 10 years old. So like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Empire Strikes Back, anything written by Lawrence Kasdan, quite frankly. To me, he really encapsulated that sort of like humorous but serious, freewheeling but with stakes, sort of vibe of those movies of the time. And they've really influenced, all forms of my writing, my comic book writing, my television writing, my feature writing. I'm very much like a product of those those movies in the summers of like the early 1980s.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely see that in the writing too. And especially one thing now, this is your first run on Comixology, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So now going into the digital creation side of things, so knowing that the book is going to go there first, is there any difference in your approach to storytelling or crafting, knowing it's going there first instead of the traditional way to the shops?
I'll be totally honest with you. There should be. Comixology gives you this whole long, like big list, this sort of handbook about like the way pages should be laid out and the way things should be lettered, and it's all designed really to make it easier for the guided view experience. But don't tell Comixology this. I'm sure they're not listening to this podcast. I didn't really pay much attention to those guidelines, and that's in large part because I didn't, whenever I work with an artist, I never want to tie their hands. And I never want, the cart of format to drag the horse. So I've kind of, you know, intentionally forgot a lot of those guidelines. And by the way, it all works out fine. Like, obviously I've been writing comics for Marvel for years. They have, guided their version of guided view on
Mm.
on Marvel Unlimited. The bottom line is that it's nice to write for digital, but at the same time, if you're just writing for just the medium of comics, the guided view works itself out.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, that's one thing. I mean, we're seeing a lot more stuff going with digital too. And that's always something just me as a fan just is always very curious about because obviously it's still the same skeleton, so to speak, but how it fills out, that's I think is just something that fans are now really starting to pick up on in this digital age.
Yeah, I think so too. And one thing that I am interested in exploring is doing something specifically for the medium of digital, but like leveraging digital. So like,
Hmm.
in other words, designing it with, and right now I don't think that the tech is quite there or the pipeline's not there, but like designing it so that you really are intentionally reading it in guided view. And maybe some of those panels are slightly animated, where there's stuff that's slightly moving. Like there are ways, I think Marvel's done a good job of this, like with their Infinite comics on Marvel Unlimited. Like there is a version of this, not of Monarch, but of just writing where I'm writing specifically for the medium of digital. Whereas one of the things I love about Comixology is they're not, apart from their guidelines, they're not saying write this for digital. It's that it happens to be released digitally, at least at first, because they have, obviously partnerships with, different publishers that will occasionally collect, the book into collect the series into a physical book. So my attitude, long-winded answer, my attitude is, unless you're writing specifically for the medium of digital in a very specific way to really leverage, like I said, the things that digital can do that print can't do, like guided view, like animated, panels. I kind of am just look at it as like, oh, it's a comic book. It just happens to be a comic book that's available first digitally, which is really the way, Comixology approaches it. And I think that's great. I think Comixology is like, we don't need to get cute here.
Mhm.
We don't
Yeah.
need to, you know, um, we don't need to invent a format that will dictate the story. We want the story to dictate the story. And I think and similar to what I was saying is that if I were to write something specifically for digital, um, I would write it. It would have to be a story that really leverages all those things I mentioned.
Mm.
So you're taking full advantage of it, and the story kind of requires it. Does that make sense?
No, that makes
So
perfect sense. I really love that answer, actually.
so on top of that, just going off of that, having Harvey there, backing you up, what was first his reaction to the story, and then going with that whole idea of, doing digital and trying to push the boundary as I'm trying to get out of the whole digital format. Would you consider, maybe your next book that you did with Comixology, trying to blend together the idea of a guided view, or even as a, were semi-popular for a hot minute, the motion comics?
Yeah, okay, well, to be probably, oh God, I'm gonna get in so much trouble for this interview. So I'm
I did
actually
my
already
job.
I already have two additional projects in the pipeline at COMIXOLOGY, which we haven't announced yet. That's why I could get in trouble. But those are not designed to be like digital specific. But I was thinking like if I were to do a fourth series with COMIXOLOGY, which I would love to do because they've really been fantastic to work with. They're really terrific. Then I would like to play around with something, like a motion comic, or using guided view to, if you go from panel to panel to panel in guided view, and each of those panels are identical but slightly similar, then you'll get that illusion of motion. It's stuff like that that I'm very intrigued about, playing with. But I'm also, like I said, very sensitive about the cart dragging the horse. So I want to make sure that I'm not like that I'm coming up with an idea that is meant for that, as opposed to just doing it to do it. Because I think one of the I've done a motion comic before. I've actually done two, and I think one of the problems with motion comics, and one of the reasons it didn't quite take off, was it didn't know what it wanted to be, and the people doing them, myself included, didn't know what we wanted to sort of get out of it, apart from doing like sort of, basically low end animation. I still believe in motion comics. I still believe in the potential of motion comics, but the marriage of the right story for that medium has yet to be kind of found.
Agreed. Totally. Thank you.
Absolutely. And with somebody like with your vast experience, obviously TV, comics, and everything, we'll kind of stick with comics with this, but you've played in the sandbox, obviously, of the big two, obviously playing with Spider-Man and the X-Men and Star Wars. And now, of course, you've done other indie comics before as well. And COMIXOLOGY is kind of an indie house where you have, these story ideas where you get more control. So I was kind of wondering, what are the pros and cons of like being in that constrictive sandbox of like a Marvel compared to being in that like almost like you get to choose your own adventure, and obviously I'm sure there's notes and stuff, but you still get to shape the world the way you want to for an independent comic like on COMIXOLOGY.
Yeah, it's really the difference between playing with certain toys and making up your own toys. And there's pros and cons to both. Like, and the reason I do both is that I see like the pros and cons of working on my own creations. When I was in 2020, when I sort of made this, sort of this renewed push into create your own books, it was really out of the realization that it had been a long while. I think it had been like 8 years or something since I had done a create your own book. And I realized that's 8 years is far too long. Because, I I always say I work for 10-year-old me, and 10-year-old me, left to his own devices, would happily just write Star Wars and Star Trek and, Spider-Man and X-Men and all the big two and beyond stuff.
Right.
But I do feel like creatively you want to replenish your own creative reservoirs with something totally original, and I think it's also important to put stuff back out into the universe that is wholly original. It's funny, like Star Wars exists because George Lucas couldn't get the rights to do Flash Gordon, and Indiana Jones exists because they wouldn't hire Steven Spielberg to direct James Bond. And I'm like, thank God they didn't get to play with those toys, because they had to create these new ones that are really cool that now we all play with. So I'm, it's one of the things that was sort of behind this, what I call this renewed push in 2020 into creator-owned works, because I felt like, I don't want to choose between having to work for the big two or do creator-owned work. I really want to do both, because there are pros and cons to both, and the grass is always greener on the other side. So, people, it's a little bit like the question I get asked a lot about the different mediums I work in. People are always asking me like, well, what's your favorite medium to work in? And I'm like, it's whatever medium I'm not currently working in. And if you were to ask me, what do you prefer doing, creator-owned work or work for hire? I'd say it's whatever I'm not doing at the moment. Because
Right.
I really do enjoy both, and I enjoy both equally. So I'm glad I haven't gotten myself into a situation where I really have to choose between the two.
And especially too, as when fans really pick this up too, is now going back to the creator own with the Adventures of Ulysses Monarch. One of the biggest things I think is going to stand out to them too, and then see the creator influence on there is the dynamic between Casey and Ulysses. When you were structuring the story, how important was that as the foundation of the story? Because that's after non-spoiler, but that's kind of the vibe I got after reading issue number one.
You know, it's funny. I always, even though I initially conceive of something usually through the idea or usually through the high concept, um, I really like that may be the first brick I lay, but the very next brick is character. And I I haven't. It's funny looking back on the creator-owned books that I've done in that sort of 2020 to 2025 period.
Mhm.
I did notice very unintentionally they all have a father-daughter dynamic to them. And in the case of Monarch and Casey, it's sort of a found family version of father and daughter. She's not actually his daughter, but they have that kind of relationship. So clearly, I've got two daughters myself. They're relatively young. And obviously, like that, what was in the water for me when I was writing all these creator-owned books. It's interesting. It was very unconscious on my part. It just happened to have turned out that way.
Yeah, but it definitely comes off very organic, and that's one thing that it really stuck out to me after reading the first issue, along with all the great things that are happening there. And I don't want to give those away just yet because I want everybody to go out and make sure they read this book first. But that is just one of those elements that I was noticing really connected with me as the reader, like right off the bat. Like the characters really stuck out for that aspect, and to see where their story goes from issue number one is going to be something really exciting to see.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's funny because, again, I sort of started out with the side concept, Indiana Jones and our future, but the very next question I had asked myself is, okay, well, it's obviously not Indiana Jones. It has to be, you know, a brand new character. Who is Ulysses Monarch?
Mhm.
What makes him tick? What motivates him? How is he different from Indiana Jones? And that I think asking those questions really opened up a lot of narrative possibilities for me and really informed the relationship that he has with Casey because he had been abandoned by his dad once he basically stopped being of use to his dad. His dad's kind of like a scummy ne'er-do-well scoundrel who kind of like really damaged Monarch and obviously we know that's different from Indiana Jones, who was maybe damaged by his father in a very very different way.
Mm.
But like having doing that character work, it made it easier to write Monarch just as a character, but also made it a lot easier to sort of figure out, okay, what's the dynamic between him and Casey? Because, like you said, that dynamic is very much a foundational concept in the book.
Now,
Yeah.
speaking of characters and to the strength that you've already given them, what has been your favorite character to write? And then because of Casey, how much of your daughters are showing up in her?
Oh, good question. Well, it's funny. I'll take the second part first. In hindsight, Casey's basically my youngest. Someone who's an old soul who is, 13 going on 80, and who, basically is not afraid to kick some ass when necessary. My favorite character to write is a character named Francis, who is their sort of robot, this floating robot on their ship. And what's fun about Francis is that Francis considers himself a expert in all things 20th and 21st century, but he gets it wrong. He's actually talking totally out of his cybernetic ass. So like, when they find like an iPhone, he's like, "Oh, that's a cognitive dampener. That's, people would like stare at these things for hours and hours and it would make them dumber." So, having a character like Francis who's got like a little he's got a little dryness to him, but he also I love writing a character who thinks he knows more than he actually does.
Right on, right on. So I'm going to change up my next question because I had this down earlier, but then you kind of answered. You said what your favorite format is whichever one you're not currently writing. So I'm going to change this because you've done so much doing TVs, movies, books, comics, you name it. You've written pretty much across all of them. I would say I'm going to ask, what is your favorite part of like each one? I mean, you can lump some of them together. But what is your favorite part of writing of those genre or the different platforms, I should say?
Great question. So in comics, it's got to be getting the art in from the artists. Like that is so special. Like it's, it's like this little jolt of adrenaline that arrives via email almost every day. So that in comics, it's absolutely that. In television, it's getting notes. No, I'm kidding. Though that it feels like it does feel like working in television. There's no part that isn't getting notes. It's all notes. But I would say it's being on set and helping, produce it. And even I would even include pre-production in that, because one of the things I actually really enjoy about TV is solving those budget problems and solving those scheduling problems. And how do you make this work? How is this going to actually be filmed and come in on time and on budget? So I enjoy that challenge. For features, I really, honestly, I really enjoy the writing process of features. When you're writing comics and you're writing television, you're always working on a deadline. And the nice thing about feature work is, generally speaking, unless it's like a rewrite or something, your first draft is pretty much written on your own timeline. And I can like really take the time to craft every single word, and even down to the like how the stage direction reads. So I love having that much time to really get it right. So that's nice. And then in writing prose, I like I like the fact that it's all on me. I'm the actors, I'm the art director, I'm the cinematographer, I'm the director, I'm the set designer. And there's something just very, while I love the collaboration of all the other mediums I work in, I think because I have all those collaborations, it's a novelty to just be by myself, with the blank page. And I just found, especially when I was writing In Any Lifetime, like writing that novel was like one of the just purest creative experiences of my life, because I'm really just only writing it for myself. I'm not writing it for a crew to produce or actors to act or an artist to draw. It's literally just me. And there's something, there's something kind of nice about that. So I kind of, I've sort of always imagined that once I age out of television and comics and film, I'll make writing prose my full-time occupation. Hopefully I'm not like close to that, but that's my retirement plan.
No, when you said that, that makes a lot of sense though, because like in every other medium, you kind of put your idea out there, you put what's in your head out there, and then you are actually reliant on others to make that a reality. Whereas when you're writing the prose, you actually get to make all of it a reality. So you don't have to
Yeah.
worry if somebody's not on the same page or wavelength as you, or and how that works out.
Well, I will say also, I mean, the downside is that in every medium other than prose, I have people who are making me look better, you
Yeah.
know. So there is definitely a downside to it being all on my shoulders, because I don't have the advantage of drafting off of these very, very super talented people who, make something look a million times better than I'd ever even seen in my head. So again, it's like pros and cons to everything, and I like both things a lot. I think one of the things I'm so fortunate of is, or so grateful of, is that I do get to have all these different experiences with these different people and different craftsmen, and sometimes those experiences are just me. And that has its pluses too.
No, absolutely. Now, with this series, it's slated to go 5 issues. Now,
Yeah.
without giving anything away, is there more Ulysses stories that you have in the back of your head that maybe we'll see down the road after this?
Yes, there's the way we've ended the first arc is, I guess, kind of like the way I would have ended it if it was a movie, where
Yeah.
you feel like you got a complete meal. It feels like a beginning, middle, and end, and it doesn't end. I would say it doesn't end on like a classic cliffhanger, but it definitely ends with what I'll call a paradigm shift that suggests future stories.
Okay. I like that.
So
Trying to do that as non-spoilery as possible.
That works.
I
No,
like it.
that
That was good.
that works. Yeah.
so perfect segue, and I'm gonna put this just a little bit. I'm going to give you a little tunnel vision in this. If this, since you said, you know, you've written this up and tied it with a bow as if it'd be a perfect first season or first act or first movie, from your laundry list of shows that you've done, who would you put into the roles on this?
Oh gosh. Well, I'll tell you. First of all, I will tell you, I'm the worst. I'm really the worst. Like person at casting. Casting is I always say the weakest club in my bag. But I would have to say like I think he'd have to be younger than he is right now to pull off Monarch. But I think Manu Bennett would be like the perfect
Ooh.
Monarch. Um,
That'd be amazing.
because he's got like that mix of, a little hint of danger. He's got a lot of charm. Not that we got to write to the charm a lot on Arrow, but definitely has that club in his bag, and I just think he would make a really really good Monarch.
That's a wow. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sold on it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I was gonna say somebody got Tom speechless over one. Usually when you ask
Oh,
the
no,
question,
no, no,
Tom,
no, 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 no. I can keep going. You know me, but
oh yeah,
no,
I know.
he nailed that one right on the head.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Now, before we let you go, this week is coming up, May the 4th, and knowing your Star Wars aficionado, and like I say, there is a lot of influence in this book as well. What is your favorite Star Wars movie and why?
Unfortunately, I have a
Whoa.
very cliche answer. It's Empire
Rebels.
Strikes.
Oh.
It's Empire Strikes Back. I saw Empire when I was 8 years, no, maybe 9 years old. Um, it like, you know, I had never like experienced a sequel before. So I didn't even know what I was watching, but I knew I loved it. And I knew that it had humor and action and a propulsiveness that the first Star Wars didn't have.
Mm.
So it was like everything I loved about A New Hope, like turned up to 11. And like I said earlier, like that writing, that style of writing that Caston does has been a huge influence on me, over the years. So it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous movie. So Empire is definitely my favorite. I have a real sweet soft spot for Solo, uh, another
Okay.
Lawrence Kasdan, another Lawrence Kasdan written thing. Probably not a coincidence there. But I feel like Solo is much maligned. I really, really love Solo. I think it's just an absolutely outstanding, raucous, fun Star Wars. It's just it's everything I love about Star Wars, wrapped up into one fun movie.
I'm with you on that. Believe it
Yeah.
or not, I am one of those the minority of people who would really really love Solo.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
like,
Solo gets
I
a bad rap.
I think, by the way, I think had Solo not come out 6 months after Last Jedi, I think it would have been evaluated completely differently.
mhm. Oh,
Agreed.
Yeah.
Absolutely differently. So, I really think that I think that's worth a second look or maybe even a first look from some people.
absolutely.
It'd be a perfect weekend to do it, obviously, with May the 4th kicking off after Free Comic Book Day. So,
By the
yeah.
way, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I have a comic book coming out on Free Comic Book Day. I've got a story in the Star Wars volume. It ties into my Jedi Knights series, but it is really like, like all the individual stories in Jedi Knights. It's standalone, beginning, middle, and end. Madabek Musabekov, and Luis Guerrero nailed the art as they always do. Um, so if you're in both a Free Comic Book Day and a Star Wars Day kind of mood, I commend it to your attention.
Somebody
My
call Josh.
Yeah, I was gonna say my co-host has been circling that on his calendar. He's been reviewing Star Wars Jedi Knights and sings the praises every time it comes out. So I know when Free Comic Book Day is lined up, he was like, "Yeah, this is the first one I'm running down to the shop to go get." So
Thank you. Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And I'm loving, honestly, like working on Jedi Knights is such a thrill for me. Not just because it's Star Wars, but because I don't know, this one I've just got in my teeth and I feel it every time I write an issue. And I'm just really, really enjoying it. I'm also enjoying like sort of the done in one challenge, like
Mhm.
giving each issue its own beginning, middle, and end has been in 20 pages, has been a really interesting challenge, but it's really kind of like invigorated the writing, I think. So, it's if you haven't checked it out, I wish you would.
Definitely.
Well, as our time comes with you to an end, as people are watching this now, as this is released, The Adventures of Ulysses Monarch is now up on Comixology, so you're going to want to go check that out because peek behind the curtain, we all got to read it early, and we were all big fans of it. So, with that being said, we have you here. It's the final pitch time. Why, when people after they hear this, why should they run over to Comixology and check this book out?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, honestly, because I mean, this sounds so self-serving, but the question sort of calls for it. It's just a really entertaining comic. Like it's not, look, it's not reinventing the world. It's not Watchmen. It's just, I think it does show how the medium of comics is so much bigger than just superheroes. That you can have a big raucous adventure with a lot of like double page spreads without capes and tights.
Absolutely. We were talking about it when we were talking about this last night before the interview. I had said that this book was fun. That was my first word for it. And then what I do here, we were actually discussing this last night, is for most of the comics I review, I do very few superhero books. I do a lot of like outside, like so it's kind of interesting, like doing this. I'm like, this is right up my alley because this is the kind of book I review because it's not that I don't like superheroes. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big Batman fan. But at the same point in juncture, there's something really cool out there. We were busting it down like last night. I think Space Ghost is like the only real that and Spawn are the only two real superheroes.
And even Space Ghost and Spawn are like, not exactly your traditional superheroes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so this was right up my alley. So if you're somebody who's looking for something that isn't, your standard run of the mill, superhero story, and that's all you think comics are. If you're coming across this and like, oh, that's all that they are, they're not. There's so much more. And this book is a lot of fun. I'm just throwing that one out.
I'm going to second Rich here because everybody knows, usually what I cover for Nerd Initiative. I do a lot of the pop culture stuff, and I do, the B tier superheroes, like, these kind of guys and stuff. So when even me picking this up, I go, oh, hey, I kind of feel this. I kind of recognize that. So it's an absolute must get.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I cover a wide variety of stuff, so I'll just leave it at that. But I will just give this to the audience listening on podcast form or watching on YouTube. If you're a fan of Hollywood blockbuster style movies, if you're fans of adventure with a little intrigue to it, and really get captivated by characters that show you a little heart as they go on their journey, because there's so much going on with the story that they have not revealed yet, The Adventures of Ulysses Monarch is the book you want to pick up on Comixology Originals when it drops. And seriously, make a point to pick it up. And while you're down at Free Comic Book Day, definitely check out what Mark's writing because he's doing a lot of fantastic work that everybody should be talking about. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us. We definitely have to recap when the first arc is all done later down the road.
I'd love to come back anytime you guys would have me. Thank you all very, very much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we will end this with a little twist like we always do on Turn a Page. When you're at the comic shops and you have your tablet with you, because it's not on print form just yet, but mark my words, this will definitely be coming because it's that fantastic of an issue. And that issue is The Adventures of Ulysses Monarch, #1. And you see somebody struggling to find something, hand your tablet off to them. Tell them to turn a page. We'll see you next time.
I'm out.